The council chamber stretched out like a vast arena among the stars. Hundreds of alien species filled the seats, their forms ranging from crystalline beings that glowed with inner light to massive creatures that resembled living rocks. At the center of it all stood Kelrin Voss, and he was shaking. Kelrin belonged to the Etherian people, a species known throughout the galaxy for their grace and wisdom. His kind had tall, slender bodies with skin that shimmered like moonlight on water. For 10,000 years, his people had given the galaxy gifts of art, medicine, and philosophy. They had never asked for anything in return. Until now. The holographic display behind Kelran showed images that made even the hardest species look away. Dead worlds, burned cities, organic ships that looked like massive insects tearing through planetary defenses. The Scourge had come to Etherian space 3 months ago, and they brought only death. "Honored council members," Kelran said, trying to keep his voice steady. "The Scourge has already destroyed 3 of our colony worlds. 2 billion of my people are dead. Now they come for our homeworld, for Etheria itself. We have only weeks, perhaps days." He paused, looking at the sea of alien faces. "We are a peaceful people. We have no weapons capable of stopping them. We need your help." The chamber fell silent. Then the Xyrelians spoke, their crystalline forms chiming like broken glass. "The Prime Non-Interference Directive is clear. Each species must handle its own military matters." The Korthan representative, a massive reptilian creature with scales like armor plates, laughed. It was not a kind sound. "The Etherians chose peace. They chose to have no military. That was their decision. Why should we pay for their foolishness?" "Because millions will die," Kelran said, and he hated how his voice cracked. "Because we are part of this council, part of this galactic community. Because it is right." A Vex collective speaker clicked its mandibles, speaking in the cold logic of the hive mind. "Our calculations show that if the Scourge consumes Etheria, they will need 6 months to digest the biomass. This gives other species time to prepare defenses. Etheria's sacrifice serves the greater good." Kelran felt something break inside him. These were the great powers of the galaxy, the ancient civilizations that had crossed the stars for millions of years, and they were going to let his world die because it was convenient. He did something then that no Etherian had done in recorded history. He fell to his knees. The council chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Etherians were proud. They were dignified. They did not beg. But Kelran pressed his forehead to the cold floor and spoke, his voice raw with desperation. "Please, I am begging you. My daughter is on Etheria. She is only 6 years old. She likes to paint pictures of the twin moons. She has never hurt anyone. There are 2 billion people like her on my world. Children, artists, teachers, farmers. They are not warriors, but they deserve to live. Please, I will do anything. My people will do anything. Just help us." The vote was called. The numbers appeared on the great display. 347 against intervention. 52 abstentions. 3 in favor. Security officers came to escort Kelran from the chamber. He walked in a daze, barely seeing the corridors of the station. They left him in an observation deck alone with his failure. Through the massive windows he could see Etheria in the distance, a blue-green jewel among the stars. Soon it would be gray and dead. Kelran did not know how long he sat there. Time had lost meaning. His people would die, and he had failed them. He had begged on his knees, and it had not mattered. "Ambassador Voss?" The voice was female, speaking in slightly accented galactic standard. Kelran looked up to see 3 humans standing in the doorway. He knew of humans, of course. They were the newcomers to the galactic community, barely 20 years since first contact. Most council species considered them barely civilized. The woman who had spoken was middle-aged with gray streaking through her dark hair. She wore a military uniform with the insignia of a captain. Behind her stood a younger man in a similar uniform, and a woman in civilian clothes carrying a datapad. "I am Captain Lisa Grant of the Terran vessel Horizon," the woman said. "This is Commander Jake Morrison and Dr. Helen Price. We heard your speech to the council." Kelran tried to compose himself, to find some dignity. "Then you know that the galaxy has abandoned my people." "The council abandoned you," Lisa said. She walked over and sat down beside him, looking out at the stars. "That's not the same thing as the galaxy, and it's definitely not the same as humanity. I do not understand." Lisa turned to face him directly. Her eyes were kind but hard at the same time, like someone who had seen terrible things and remained good anyway. Humanity has only been on the council for 20 years. Our vote doesn't carry much weight. We were among the 3 who voted to help you. But that didn't matter much, did it? Then why are you here? Kelran asked. Because we're going to help you anyway. Kelran stared at her. You cannot be serious. Your fleet is small. The Scourge Armada numbers in the tens of thousands. You would be committing suicide. Jake Morrison spoke up for the first time. He had a soldier's bearing, standing straight and alert. Probably. But that's our choice to make. But why? Kelran felt tears on his face again. You barely know us. Earth has no strategic interest in Etheria. Your own council position could be damaged. Why would you do this? Dr. Helen Price, the civilian, answered. She was younger than the others, with bright eyes full of intelligence. Because someone has to. Because 2 billion lives matter more than politics. Because if we don't help when we can, what kind of people does that make us? Most species would say it makes you smart, Kelran said bitterly. Practical, realistic. Most species aren't human, Lisa said with a slight smile. Look, Ambassador, I'm not going to lie to you. We don't have a big fleet. We can maybe scrape together 4 or 5 ships and a couple thousand personnel. Against the Scourge numbers you described, our chances are bad. But bad chances are better than no chances. Your people will die for mine. Some of them, yeah, Jake said bluntly. That's what happens in war. But here's the thing about humans. We're pretty good at war. We've had a lot of practice, unfortunately, and we really don't like bullies. Lisa stood up and offered her hand to Kelran. He looked at it, confused by the human gesture. She smiled again. It's how we seal agreements. You take my hand, I take yours. It means we're in this together. Kelran reached out and clasped her hand. Her grip was warm and strong. We leave for Etheria in 6 hours, Lisa said. We've already sent word to Earth. More ships are coming, but they won't get here in time. So we go with what we have. I want you on my ship. You know your homeworld, you know the Scourge. We'll need that knowledge. You are really going to do this, Kelran said, still not quite believing it. We really are, Helen confirmed. I've been studying the data you presented. The Scourge are biological, which means they have weaknesses we can exploit. We just need to find them. I have to warn you, Kelran said. If you do this, you will anger the Council. Many species already fear humanity's aggression. This will confirm their fears. Lisa shrugged. Let them be afraid. We're not here to make friends. We're here to do what's right. She started toward the door, then paused and looked back. You asked why we would help strangers. My grandfather used to tell me something. He said that the true measure of a person isn't how they treat their friends. It's how they treat people they have nothing to gain from helping. I think that applies to species too. Jake clapped Kelran on the shoulder as he passed. Come on, Ambassador. We've got a planet to save. Kelran followed them out of the observation deck, his mind reeling. 6 hours ago, he had knelt before the Council and been rejected. Now these humans, these newcomers to the stars, were offering to die for his people. He did not understand them, but he was grateful beyond words. As they walked through the corridors of the station, Kelran saw other species watching. Some looked away in shame. Others watched with calculating eyes. A very few, watched with something like hope. The humans walked with purpose, already talking about strategies and logistics. They did not seem afraid, even though they were heading into almost certain death. Kelran realized something then. Courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. And these humans, whatever else they were, had courage to spare. Maybe, just maybe, his people had a chance after all. The emergency meeting room aboard the Horizon was cramped and filled with tension. Kelran sat quietly in the corner, watching as the humans argued loudly about what they were going to do. He was learning that humans did everything loudly. Admiral Peter Shaw appeared on the main screen, his face transmitted from Earth's Defense Command. He looked angry. Captain Grant, you're talking about committing an act of war without Council authorization. This could have serious political consequences for Earth. With respect, Admiral, Lisa said calmly. We're talking about saving 2 billion lives. I'll worry about politics after they're safe. Your task force would be unsanctioned. You'd have no support, no reinforcements. The math is simple. You can't win. Lisa leaned forward, her hands flat on the table. Maybe not. But we can buy time. We can evacuate civilians. We can make the Scourge pay for every inch of Etherian soil. That has to count for something. Another voice joined the conversation. Ambassador Claire Stevens from Earth's Council delegation spoke from her office on the station. Admiral Shaw, I've reviewed the charter. There's nothing that explicitly forbids member species from providing military aid. The Council voted not to provide aid as a body, but individual species can act on their own. That's a technicality, the Admiral said. Then let's use it, Claire replied. Sir, I watched Ambassador Voss beg on his knees today. I watched the Council turn away. If we do the same, what does that say about us? We didn't join the galactic community to abandon our principles. The discussion continued for another hour. Kelrin listened to them debate and argue, and he realized something. They were afraid. They knew the odds. They knew many would die. But they were going to do it anyway because they believed it was right. It was illogical. It was beautiful. Finally, another screen activated. President Maya Torres, leader of Earth's government, appeared. Everyone in the room stood a little straighter. She looked tired, like someone who had been woken in the middle of the night. She probably had been. I've been listening to this debate, President Torres said. Admiral Shaw, you're right about the risks. Ambassador Stevens, you're right about the law. Captain Grant, you're right about the morality. She paused. Earth has only been in space for a short time. We've made mistakes. We've been called aggressive, primitive, dangerous. Maybe we are all those things. But we're also the kind of people who help when someone needs it. We go, the Admiral nodded slowly. Then we'll send everything we can spare. It won't be much. It'll be enough, Lisa said. It has to be. After the meeting ended, Kelrin approached Lisa. Your president is taking a great risk. That's her job, Lisa said simply. Leading means making the hard choices. Now come on, let me show you our battle plan. The plan was insane by Etherian standards. Earth would send 5 ships. The destroyers Valiant and Horizon, the carrier Wellington with its fighter squadron, the frigate Liberty and Defiant, and the hospital ship Mercy. 2,000 personnel total against a Scourge armada of 50,000 bioships. We can't match their numbers, Jake explained, pointing to tactical displays. So we don't try. We use hit-and-run tactics. We split their attention. We make them think we're everywhere at once. But your ships will be vulnerable if they separate, Kelrin protested. Yep, Jake agreed. But it's the only way to protect multiple targets simultaneously. The carrier will deploy fighters to harass their fleet. The destroyers will break through to provide orbital support. The frigates will run interference. And the Mercy will land and start evacuating civilians. You are planning to lose, but lose slowly, Kelrin said. Lisa smiled grimly. We're planning to win by refusing to give up. It's different. The fleet gathered over the next few hours. Kelrin watched through the Horizon's windows as the ships took formation. They looked small compared to Council vessels. They looked fragile, but they moved with purpose, their crews ready. The journey to Etheria took 3 days at maximum speed. During that time, Kelrin learned about humans in ways he had never expected. They were nothing like the other species he had known. On the second day, Jake invited him to the mess hall. Kelrin was surprised to find the crew singing. They had instruments, guitars, and drums, and they sang songs about home and loss and fighting against impossible odds. When they saw Kelrin, they did not stop. Instead, they taught him the words. We always sing before battle, Jake explained. It reminds us what we're fighting for. But these songs are sad, Kelrin said. They speak of death and sacrifice. Yeah, but they also speak of courage and love. That's what makes them powerful. Jake took a drink and looked at Kelrin seriously. You know what makes humans different from most species? We know we're going to die someday. Every single one of us. And instead of letting that make us afraid, we let it make us brave. If death is coming anyway, might as well make it mean something. Kelrin thought about that for a long time. Dr. Helen Price spent hours working with Etherian scientists via long-range communication. She was trying to find biological weaknesses in the Scourge. Kelran watched her work, impressed by her dedication. She barely slept. Why are you pushing yourself so hard? He asked during one of her brief breaks. Helen looked up from her microscope, her eyes red from fatigue. Because every hour I work might mean another 1,000 people saved. That's worth being tired. You barely know my people. I know your people. That's enough. She went back to her work. Besides, this is fascinating from a scientific perspective. The Scourge use pheromones for coordination. If we can disrupt that, we might cause chaos in their ranks. That would require getting a disruption agent into their command structure, Kelrin said. I know. We're working on it. Helen smiled, though it did not reach her tired eyes. We'll find a way. On the third day, they encountered a Scourge scout cluster. 5 organic ships, each the size of a building, detected the human fleet and moved to intercept. Kelrin watched from the bridge as battle stations were called. The engagement was brutal and fast. The human ships coordinated their fire with mechanical precision. They used nuclear missiles, kinetic rounds moving at incredible speeds, and energy weapons that turned the Scourge ships into vapor. The scouts never had a chance, but neither did the Liberty. A dying Scourge vessel rammed the frigate, tearing through its hull. Kelrin watched in horror as the ship broke apart, emergency pods scattering like seeds. Some made it. Many did not. 200 humans died in less than 5 minutes. The fleet stopped to recover survivors. Kelrin went to the shuttle bay and saw the rescue teams bringing in the wounded. He saw a young woman, barely 20, pulled from a pod. She was crying, repeating the names of friends who had not made it. He saw Jake Morrison moving through the survivors, checking on each one personally, making sure they knew they were safe. He saw Lisa Grant sitting alone in her ready room later, recording personal messages to the families of everyone who had died. All 200 of them. She spoke about their courage, their sacrifice, how they had died protecting strangers. Kelran stood in the doorway watching her work. "How do you bear it?" he asked quietly. "Knowing you sent them to their deaths?" Lisa looked up and Kelran saw tears on her face. "I don't, but I do it anyway because it's my responsibility. Every person on this fleet volunteered. They knew the odds. They came anyway. The least I can do is honor their memory." "I do not understand your species," Kelran admitted. "Most days neither do I." Lisa wiped her eyes and stood up. "But here's what I do understand. We have feelings, Ambassador. Deep, strong feelings. Love and hate, joy and sorrow. And yes, we feel all of them intensely. That's what makes us human. We care so much it hurts. And that caring, that pain, that's what makes us fight. Not because we're violent, because we're compassionate." The next morning they arrived at Etheria. What they saw made even the hardened human crew fall silent. The Scourge Armada filled orbital space like a swarm of locusts. Thousands of organic vessels writhing and pulsing blocked out the stars. Below on Etheria's surface, Kelrin could see cities burning. Landing pods fell like rain, carrying Scourge ground forces to consume everything they touched. "Sweet mercy," Lisa whispered. "We're too late." "No," Kelrin said firmly, surprising himself. "You taught me that fighting is not about winning or losing. It is about refusing to give up. My people are still alive down there. We can still help them." Lisa looked at him, then smiled. It was a warrior's smile. "Damn right we can. All ships, battle stations, let's show these bugs what humans are made of." The fleet charged forward into impossible odds. Kelrin strapped himself into a seat on the bridge, ready to help however he could. He had spent his whole life believing in peace. But these humans had taught him something new. Sometimes peace had to be defended. And sometimes defending it meant fighting with everything you had. The battle for Etheria was about to begin. The Scourge Armada was worse than anything the human fleet had prepared for. The tactical display showed organic ships swarming around Etheria, like insects around rotting fruit. Each vessel pulsed with bioluminescence, and they moved in patterns that seemed random but were somehow coordinated. On the planet below, entire cities were already going dark. "Give me numbers," Lisa commanded from the captain's chair. "Scourge vessels number 47,000 in orbital space," Jake reported. "Another 3,000 deployed to the surface. Etherian defensive satellites are down to 30% effectiveness. Ground resistance is minimal." Lisa nodded slowly. The numbers were even worse than their worst estimates. But she had not come this far to turn back now. "Open fleet-wide channel," the communication officer nodded. "Channel open, Captain." Lisa took a breath and spoke. "All ships, this is Grant. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. We're outnumbered 20 to 1. Most military doctrines would call this suicide. And you know what? They're probably right. But we didn't come here to follow military doctrine. We came here because people need help, and we're the only ones who answered. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to split up. We're going to be everywhere they don't expect us. We're going to hit them so hard they'll forget they outnumber us. And we're going to save as many Etherians as we possibly can. That's the mission. That's the only thing that matters. Grant out." General Nathan Cross, commanding from the carrier Wellington, spoke over the command channel. "All fighters launch. Squadron leaders, You have your attack patterns. Make every shot count. The Wellington's belly opened and small fighter craft poured out like angry wasps. There were only 60 of them. Outdated models that Earth could spare, but they flew with precision and purpose. Lieutenant Amy Rogers led her squadron in the first attack run. Her fighter was older than she was, held together with spare parts and prayers, but it had weapons and she knew how to use them. Blue Squadron on me. We're going for the command cluster. Red Squadron, hit their flanks. Make them look at you. Captain Ben Taylor, leading Red Squadron, laughed over the comm. Copy that. Let's go make some bugs angry. The fighters dove into the Scourge formation. The organic ships responded slowly at first, not recognizing the small craft as threats. That hesitation cost them. Amy's squadron unleashed a barrage of missiles into a cluster of Scourge command vessels. The explosions sent shockwaves through the enemy formation. Good hit, Amy called out. Break and attack. Don't let them target lock. The fighters scattered, each pilot picking targets and firing with practiced skill. They moved fast, too fast for the larger Scourge vessels to track easily. But the sheer number of enemies meant that luck would eventually run out. Blue 7 is hit, a voice called over the comm. I'm going in hard. Ejection systems are down. Amy watched helplessly as the fighter, trailing fire and debris, deliberately steered into a Scourge vessel. The combined explosion took out 2 more enemy ships, 3 kills for 1 loss. It was a good trade by military standards. But Amy had known that pilot. His name was Chris. He had a wife and a son back on Earth. Blue Squadron, stay focused, she said, her voice tight. Make it count. While the fighters caused chaos, the destroyers Horizon and Valiant pushed deeper into the orbital space. They moved in concert, their weapons firing constantly. Lisa watched the tactical display as her ship shook from impacts. Hull breach on Deck 4, someone reported. Sealing compartments. Keep us moving, Lisa ordered. Jake, plot a course through that gap in their formation. That's not a gap, Captain. That's a trap, I know. They'll expect us to avoid it, so we're going straight through. All power to forward shields. The Valiant followed the Horizon's lead. Both ships accelerated, their weapons blazing. The Scourge vessels closed in, trying to trap them, but the human ships were faster. They burst through the formation, leaving destroyed enemies in their wake. We're through, Jake announced. Direct line to Etheria. Good. Begin orbital bombardment of Scourge ground positions. Target anything near civilian centers. The destroyers opened fire on the planet below. Energy beams and kinetic projectiles rained down on Scourge forces, buying time for the Etherian civilians to evacuate. On the surface, Colonel Kevin Hart led 200 Marines through the burning streets of Etheria's capital city. They moved fast, their armor sealed against the toxic atmosphere the Scourge was creating. Around them, Etherian civilians ran in panic. Sergeant Martin set up a defensive perimeter at the evacuation point, Kevin ordered. We hold this position until the Mercy can land. Sergeant Olivia Martin nodded, moving her squad into position. They found Etherian civilians huddled in buildings, too afraid to move. Most had never seen violence before. The Scourge had been their first and only experience with war. Come on, Olivia called to them. We're getting you out of here. Move toward the landing zone. An Etherian teacher, her luminescent skin dim with fear, clutched a group of children. We cannot fight. We do not know how. That's why we're here, Olivia said. She pressed a plasma pistol into the teacher's hands. But if something gets past us, you point and pull the trigger. Protect these kids. The teacher looked at the weapon like it was a poisonous snake, but she took it. The Scourge ground forces arrived moments later. They were massive insectoid creatures that moved on too many legs. They spat acid and their claws could tear through metal. The Marines opened fire immediately. Private Danny Cruz fought beside Olivia, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. He saw an Etherian child fall, separated from the group. Without thinking, he ran to her, scooping her up even as Scourge warriors closed in. He made it back to the perimeter with seconds to spare. You're safe now, he told the child, setting her down behind the defensive line. Then he realized he had dropped his rifle when he grabbed her. A Scourge warrior broke through, heading straight for the civilians. Danny only had his combat knife. It would have to be enough. He charged the creature, dodging its claws, and buried the knife in what he hoped was a vital area. The Scourge warrior thrashed, catching Danny with one claw and sending him flying. He hit the ground hard. His armor cracked. The Etherian teacher he had given the weapon to earlier stepped forward and fired. Her hands shook badly, but she hit the creature. It fell. She kept firing until it stopped moving. Good shooting. Danny groaned, struggling to his feet. You're a natural. The hospital ship Mercy descended through the chaos, its shields absorbing hits from scourge fire. It was not built for combat, but it came anyway. The ship touched down at the evacuation point, and its crew poured out to help load civilians. We can take 5,000, the Mercy's captain reported. That's maximum capacity. There are 2 billion people on this planet, Kelrin said from the Horizons bridge. 5,000 is nothing. It's 5,000 more than would survive without us, Lisa replied. Every life matters, Ambassador. Back in orbit, the Wellington was taking heavy damage. General Nathan Cross watched his carrier getting torn apart by Scourge bioships. They swarmed the vessel, latching on and trying to burrow through the hull. Launch all remaining fighters, he ordered. Everyone who can fly gets in the air. Sir, we only have 30 fighters left operational, his tactical officer said. Then we make 30 count for 60. Nathan opened the general channel. All pilots, this is Cross. The carrier is compromised. We're going to use what time we have left to give you the best chance. Make us proud. The last fighters launched just as the Wellington's main reactor destabilized. Nathan stayed at his post, using the carrier's remaining weapons to draw Scourge forces away from the smaller ships. He thought about his family back on Earth. His wife would understand. She always did. The Wellington exploded, taking 300 enemy ships with it in the blast. The sacrifice created a gap in the Scourge formation, and the human fighters exploited it ruthlessly. Amy Rogers wiped tears from her eyes and kept flying. Blue Squadron, formation on me. The general bought us an opening. We don't waste it. On the Valiant's bridge, Kelrin watched humans fight and die. He saw their ships crumble under enemy fire. He saw fighters explode in silent bursts of light. He heard reports of casualties mounting, but he also saw them refuse to stop. A Scourge boarding party breached the Horizon's hull. Kelrin heard the alarms and saw human crew members grabbing weapons. He had never held a weapon before. His people did not believe in violence, but a human Marine pressed a plasma rifle into his hands. Point the dangerous end at the bad guys and pull the trigger. Simple. Kelrin's hands shook as the Scourge creatures burst onto the bridge. They were nightmares made flesh, all claws and teeth and hunger. The humans fought them with desperate courage. Kelrin closed his eyes and pulled the trigger. The weapon kicked in his hands. He opened his eyes to see the Scourge warrior falling. He had killed. He had actually killed something. He wanted to be sick, but more creatures were coming and people he cared about were in danger. He pulled the trigger again, and again. When the boarding party was finally repelled, Kelrin looked at the weapon in his hands. He was crying, but he did not put it down. I am sorry, he whispered to no one. I am so sorry. Lisa found him there after the fight. She gently took the weapon from his hands. You did what you had to do. That's all any of us can do. The Valiant was dying. Lisa Grant could feel it in the way the ship shuddered with each hit, in the way the lights flickered on and off, in the way her crew's voices grew more urgent with each passing minute. They had fought for 6 hours straight, and the destroyer had taken more damage than any ship should survive. Hull breaches on decks 2 through 5, Jake reported. His voice was steady, but Lisa could see blood on his uniform. Main reactor is at 40%. Life support is failing in half the ship. Weapons down to 30% effectiveness. Lisa looked at the tactical display. The Scourge command cluster sat in the center of their formation, a dense ball of massive bioships that coordinated the entire swarm. Helen's bioweapon would work, but only if someone could deliver it directly to those command ships. How close do we need to get? Lisa asked Helen. The doctor looked exhausted. She had been working nonstop for days. Within 100 meters of the command cluster, the weapon needs to be deployed directly into their pheromone network. Any further and they'll adapt before it spreads. 100 meters means flying through their entire defensive formation. Jake said quietly, We'd never make it. The Valiant won't make it anyway, Lisa said. She stood up from the captain's chair, her decision made. Prepare the bioweapon for deployment. All crew to escape pods. The bridge went silent. Everyone understood what she was saying. Captain, we can't abandon ship, Jake protested. We're still fighting. Not abandon, evacuate. The Valiant is going to make one final run at that command cluster. But I'm not taking the whole crew with me. Everyone gets to the pods. That's an order. Then I'm staying, Jake said firmly. You'll need a tactical officer. Jake, Captain, with respect, shut up. I'm staying. Chief Engineer Roy Patterson spoke up from his station. Someone needs to keep the engines running for this crazy plan. Guess that's me. I need to deploy the weapon at exactly the right moment, Helen added. That means I'm staying too. Lisa looked at her crew. They were volunteering to die. She should order them to leave. But she knew they would not obey. And honestly, she needed them. Fine, everyone else off the ship now. The evacuation began immediately. Crew members ran for the escape pods, many of them injured, all of them exhausted. Lisa watched them go, knowing many would not survive even if the pods made it clear. The Scourge would target anything that moved. Kelrin appeared on the bridge as the last pods launched. Lisa turned to him. Ambassador, you need to leave. Get to a pod. No, Kelrin said simply. You came across the galaxy to save my people. The least I can do is witness your courage. This is going to get ugly. I know. Kelrin sat down at an empty station. Someone should remember what you do here. Someone should tell the story. Lisa wanted to argue, but she understood. Strap in. This is going to be rough. The Valiant turned toward the Scourge command cluster. Around them, the battle still raged. Amy Rogers and her remaining fighters provided cover, drawing enemy fire. The Defiant moved alongside them for as long as it could before its damaged engines gave out. Every human ship and every human fighter was buying them seconds, precious seconds to make this final run. All power to engines and forward shields, Lisa commanded. Weapons free. Fire everything we have. The Valiant accelerated, burning its remaining fuel in one desperate push. The ship shook violently as it plowed through the Scourge formation. Enemy vessels swarmed them, firing bioweapons and ramming the shields. Forward shields at 60%, Jake called out. 50%, 40. Keep us on course, Lisa said. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair. The view screen showed nothing but enemy ships, a living wall trying to stop them. An explosion rocked the ship. Starboard engine is gone, Roy reported from engineering. Compensating. But we're losing speed. How long can you keep us moving? Long enough, Captain. I promise. Helen prepared the bioweapon, her hands moving with steady precision despite the chaos around her. Weapon is armed. Ready for deployment on your mark, Captain. Almost there, Lisa said. The command cluster grew larger on the view screen. Massive organic vessels, each one the size of a city, pulsed with bioluminescent signals. This was the brain of the Scourge invasion. Destroy this and the entire armada would fall apart. Shields at 20%, Jake said. Hull breaches throughout the ship. We're not going to make it back. Never planned to, Lisa replied calmly. We just need to make it there. A massive impact threw everyone forward. Warning alarms screamed. Half the bridge systems went dark. Kelrin looked around in horror as fire broke out in one corner. Human crew members kept working despite the flames, despite the smoke, despite knowing they were dead. Forward shields collapsed, Jake announced. We're taking direct hits to the hull. Distance to command cluster. 500 meters. 400. 300. The Valiant was falling apart. Kelrin could hear the metal groaning, feel the ship dying around them. But it kept moving forward, pushed by the sheer determination of its crew. 200 meters, Jake called out. Lisa opened a channel to all remaining human ships and to Etheria below. She wanted someone to hear this to remember. This is Captain Lisa Grant of the Terran vessel Valiant. If you're hearing this, we succeeded. We came a long way to be here, and we'd come again. To the Etherians, rebuild, remember, and live well. To my crew across the fleet, you made Earth proud. To whoever's listening years from now, this is what humanity stands for. We stand up for those who can't stand for themselves. We fight for what's right, not what's easy. And we never, ever give up. Grant out. 100 meters, Jake said quietly. Helen, deploy the weapon. Helen pressed the button. The bioweapon launched from the dying Valiant, speeding toward the command cluster. It penetrated the largest vessel's organic hull and detonated inside, releasing the viral agent into the Scourge pheromone network. Impact in 5 seconds, Jake counted down. 4, 3, 2, 1. The Valiant crashed into the command cluster. The ship's reactor, already unstable, went critical. The explosion was massive, a new sun born and dying in an instant. The blast consumed the command cluster and everything within a kilometer. In that moment, Lisa thought of Earth, of the blue skies and green forests, of her family. She thought of the 2 billion Etherians who would live because of what her crew had done. It was enough. It had to be enough. The light swallowed everything. Aboard the Defiant, Amy Rogers watched the explosion through tears. "Blue Squadron, sound off," she called over the comm. Silence. "Red Squadron?" More silence. She was the only pilot left alive. Then she saw something on her sensors. The Scourge fleet was changing. Without the coordinating pheromones from their command cluster, the organic ships were going haywire. Some attacked each other. Some fled in random directions. Some just stopped moving entirely. "All ships, this is Rogers," Amy transmitted. "The weapon worked. The Scourge are in chaos. Press the attack. Make their sacrifice mean something." The remaining human ships and the Etherian defense forces, rallied by the human courage they had witnessed, struck back with everything they had. The confused Scourge could not coordinate their defense. Within hours, the invasion fleet was destroyed or scattered. Etheria was saved. On the planet's surface, Colonel Kevin Hart and his Marines watched the sky clear of enemy ships. They had lost half their people. The cities around them were burning, but the Etherian civilians were safe. The Mercy had evacuated 50,000, making multiple trips despite the danger. "We did it," Sergeant Olivia Martin said, her voice hoarse. "We actually did it." "No," Kevin corrected gently. "They did it. The Valiant's crew. They're the ones who saved this world." Kelrin had been thrown clear in an escape pod at the last second. Jake had locked him in and launched it without permission, saving his life. Now he drifted in space, watching the debris field where the Valiant had been. Captain Lisa Grant was gone. Commander Jake Morrison was gone. Dr. Helen Price was gone. Chief Roy Patterson was gone. All of them dead. But 2 billion Etherians lived. A rescue ship found Kelrin's pod hours later. As they pulled him aboard, he looked back at Etheria. The planet was damaged but alive. Cities could be rebuilt. The dead could be mourned. Life would continue, because humans had cared enough to die for strangers. Kelrin made a promise then. He would tell their story. He would make sure the galaxy knew what these humans had done. He would make sure their sacrifice mattered. The battle was over. The price had been terrible. Of the 2,000 humans who came to Etheria, fewer than 800 survived. The Valiant was destroyed. The Liberty was destroyed. The Wellington was destroyed. The Horizon was crippled beyond repair. The Defiant barely held together, but they had won, and sometimes winning cost everything you had to give. 3 months after the battle, Kelrin Voss stood before the Etherian Assembly. The Grand Chamber had been damaged during the invasion, but it had been repaired. His people were resilient, he had learned. They could rebuild buildings. The harder question was whether they could rebuild themselves. The assembly was full. Every surviving Etherian leader had come to hear him speak. They knew he had something important to say, something that would change their civilization forever. "My people," Kelran began, his voice carrying through the chamber. "3 months ago, I begged the Galactic Council on my knees to save us. They refused. They voted to let us die because it was convenient, because we had no military, because we were weak." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But someone did come. The humans came, and they saved us," the assembly murmured. Everyone knew the story by now, but hearing Kelran speak, it made it real. 1,200 humans died defending our world. They knew they would probably die. They came anyway. Captain Lisa Grant flew her ship into the Scourge command cluster. Commander Jake Morrison stayed with her. Dr. Helen Price deployed the weapon that saved us with her last breath. These names should mean something to us. They should mean everything. Kelran gestured to the windows where Etheria's sky showed signs of recovery. "We have believed for 10,000 years that peace meant refusing to fight. That wisdom meant avoiding violence. We were wrong. The humans taught me something important. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is something you build, something you protect, something you fight for." An elder stood up, his luminescent skin flickering with emotion. "Are you saying we should become warriors? That we should abandon our principles?" "No," Kelran said firmly. "I am saying we should have the courage to defend our principles. The humans are not mindless killers. They are teachers and doctors and parents, but when people needed help, they became warriors. We must learn to do the same, not because we love violence, but because we love peace enough to protect it." The debate lasted for days, but in the end, the assembly agreed. Etheria would build a military fleet, not for conquest, not for aggression, but for defense. for helping others the way humans had helped them. The first ship they built was called the Valiant. It seemed only right. Young Etherians volunteered for military training. Among them was Syria Ven, a student who had survived because a human marine named Danny Cruz had given her his weapon and taught her how to use it. She wanted to learn how to protect others the way humans had protected her. On Earth, the survivors returned to a complicated welcome. They were heroes, but Earth's position on the Galactic Council was now uncertain. Many species feared humanity even more after seeing what they could do in combat. Jake Morrison had survived. Kelran had saved him by forcing him into an escape pod at the last moment, just as Jake had done for Kelran. Now Captain Morrison visited the families of those who had died. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. He sat in living rooms and kitchens holding the hands of parents and spouses and children. He told them the truth. He told them their loved ones had been brave, that they had made a choice, that their sacrifice had saved 2 billion lives. Some families thanked him. Some blamed him. Some just cried. He accepted all of it. It was the least he could do. Amy Rogers, now one of the most famous pilots in human space, gave interviews constantly. Every reporter wanted to know what it was like to be the last fighter pilot alive from the Battle of Etheria. She always said the same thing. We didn't do anything special. We just helped people who needed help. Anyone would have done the same. But they both knew that was not true. The Council had proven that. Only humans had answered the call. Earth's government faced intense pressure from the Galactic Council. The Zerelians demanded sanctions for violating the non-interference directive. The Korthan Dominion called humanity dangerously unpredictable. The Vex Collective calculated that humans were a destabilizing influence. But something unexpected happened. Other species began to speak up. The Meridian Commonwealth, a peaceful trading federation, proposed a new treaty. They called it the Valiant Accords. Any species that signed would pledge to defend each other against existential threats, with or without council approval. We watched the humans fight for the Etherians, the Meridian ambassador said at the council session. We were ashamed. Ashamed that we did nothing. Ashamed that newcomers to the galaxy showed more courage than ancient civilizations. Never again. 23 species signed the Valiant Accords in the first month. It was not many compared to the 400 council members, but it was a start. The galaxy was beginning to change, and humanity, barely 50 years in space, was leading that change not through strength but through example. Kelran took on a new role. He became Earth's strongest advocate on the council. But more than that, he became a voice for change throughout the galaxy. He carried with him a recording of the Battle of Etheria, the complete, unedited version showing both human sacrifice and Etherian helplessness. He showed it to council members in private meetings. Some refused to watch. Some watched and made excuses. But others watched and were moved. A year after the battle, Kelran met with a Korthan diplomat privately. The reptilian warrior had watched the recording 3 times. Your people were weak, the Korthan said bluntly. But the humans were strong. Not just in weapons. In spirit, in determination, in willingness to sacrifice, he paused. The Korthan Empire respects strength. We may have judged the humans too quickly. Will you sign the Valiant Accords? Kelran asked. Not yet. But we are considering it. That is more than we would have done a year ago. Small victories. But they added up. On Etheria, construction began on a memorial. It was built at the site where the hospital ship Mercy had landed. The memorial listed the name of every human who had died defending Etheria. 1,200 names carved in stone that would last for millennia. At the center stood a statue. It showed an Etherian kneeling before a human. But the human was helping the Etherian stand up. The message was clear. Humans did not want gratitude. They wanted partnership. They wanted others to find their own strength. The inscription read in both Etherian script and English. They came when no one else would. They fought when no one else dared. They died so strangers might live. This is the measure of humanity. May we prove worthy of their sacrifice. Kelran attended the memorial's dedication ceremony. Thousands of Etherians came. Many were survivors who had been evacuated by the Mercy. Many were families of those who had died. All came to remember. A young Etherian child named Mira Solon approached Kelran after the ceremony. Her parents had been evacuated by human marines. Ambassador Voss, why did the humans help us when no one else would? Kelran knelt down to her level. just as he had knelt before the council a year ago. But this time it was not in desperation. It was in respect, speaking to a child as an equal. Because, little one, humans understand something the rest of the galaxy forgot. Civilization is not about how advanced your technology is. It is not about how old your culture is. Civilization is about whether you help people who need help, whether you fight for what is right even when it costs everything. The humans are young and sometimes rough, but they are also brave and kind and good. They reminded us what it truly means to be civilized. Will we be like them someday? Mira asked. Kelrin smiled. We are going to try. They showed us that anyone can be a hero if they choose to care enough. That is a good lesson, do you not think? The child nodded seriously, then ran back to her parents. Kelrin stood and looked at the memorial at the names of the dead. He thought of Lisa Grant, who had flown into certain death to save strangers. Of Jake Morrison, who had refused to abandon his captain. Of Helen Price, who had worked until her last breath. Of Roy Patterson, who had kept the engines running. Of all the pilots and Marines and crew members who had given everything, ships began arriving in orbit. Not Etherian ships, ships from other species. Members of the Valiant Accords coming for joint military exercises, learning from each other. Building something new. The Meridian Commonwealth sent ships. The Talaran Federation sent scientists to share defense technology. Even a few Korthan vessels appeared, observers officially. But Kelran knew they were considering joining. The galaxy was learning. Slowly, but learning. Earth sent Admiral Peter Shaw to oversee the exercises. He was the same admiral who had argued against the mission to Etheria, but he had changed his mind after seeing what his people had accomplished. Ambassador Voss, Peter said when they met, I wanted to apologize. I almost prevented us from helping you. I was thinking about politics and strategy. I forgot about people. You learned, Kelrin said simply. That is what matters. We all learned. That evening, Kelrin sat in his quarters and composed a message to Earth. He had sent hundreds of such messages over the past year, but this one was different. This one was to the families of the Valiant's crew. Your loved ones changed the galaxy, he wrote. Not with threats or weapons, but with courage and compassion. They showed us that doing what is right matters more than doing what is safe. They proved that one act of selfless bravery can inspire millions. They saved my people, but they did more than that. They saved the idea that civilization should protect the vulnerable. That is their true legacy.